It was 5:30 in the morning, and the alarm wouldn't stop ringing. Aarav slowly opened his eyes, staring at the ceiling with a deep sigh. Just a few months ago, this same boy would leap out of bed, bursting with energy, ready to chase his dreams. But now, he didn't even want to move. His room was a museum of a former self. Sticky notes covered the walls, filled with old plans and quotes like "never give up." They looked faded now, like relics of a person who no longer existed. Aarav sat up, rubbed his tired face, and whispered to the empty room, "What's the point anymore?" He once had a grand vision, to build his own company, to create something that would make his parents proud. But after months of relentless hard work, crushing rejections, and a string of failures, the fire inside him had dwindled to a faint ember. The world no longer felt bright and full of possibility. It seemed tired, heavy, and meaningless. He dragged himself to the mirror. The reflection that stared back had the same face, the same eyes, but something vital was missing. The spark, the hope, the reason to keep going. He mindlessly scrolled through his phone, a highlight reel of everyone else's success. Friends posting their latest achievements, exotic trips, impressive promotions. And there he was, sitting in the suffocating silence of his room, completely lost. He asked himself quietly, "What happened to me? Why can't I feel that fire anymore?" That morning, his mother's voice called from the kitchen, "Aarav, you're getting late again." He didn't answer. He didn't want to talk to anyone. He just wanted to disappear. When he finally stepped outside, the city was already a whirlwind of activity. People rushing to work, buses overflowing, horns blaring. Everything looked exactly the same. Except for him, inside his heart, a storm of doubt, guilt, and fear was raging. On his way to the bus stop, he saw a little boy on the street, trying to sell pens. The boy's clothes were old and torn, but his smile was impossibly bright. He was shouting with all his might, "Sir, please buy one pen, I want to study." Aarav paused, and for the first time that day, something inside him stirred. This small boy, who seemingly had nothing, was still fighting fiercely for his dream, while he, who had so much, was on the verge of giving up. He walked over, bought a pen, and asked, "Why are you out here so early in the morning?" The boy beamed, his eyes shining. "Because I don't have time to waste, sir. I want to become a teacher one day." Aarav was speechless. He just looked into the boy's eyes, which were overflowing with pure, unshakable belief. He walked away in silence, clutching the cheap blue pen in his hand. But as he walked, something profound began to shift within him. That pen, so small, so simple, felt like a message from the universe. Maybe it wasn't over. Maybe his motivation wasn't gone forever. Maybe it was just sleeping, waiting for a reason to wake up. When Aarav returned home that night, he placed the pen on his desk. He looked at it for a long, long time, and a single thought echoed in his mind. If that little boy can keep fighting with nothing, what's my excuse? He didn't know it then, but that single moment, that single pen, was the beginning of everything changing. Because sometimes when you think your motivation is gone for good, life has a quiet way of bringing it back to you. That night, Aarav couldn't sleep. He kept staring at the small blue pen lying on his desk. It was just an ordinary, cheap plastic pen, nothing special at all. But to him, it felt like a reminder of something bigger. He remembered the boy's words, over and over again. "I don't have time to waste, sir. I want to become a teacher one day." Those words echoed in his mind like a song he couldn't turn off. For the first time in months, he felt something. It wasn't exactly motivation, but it was a spark. A soft whisper in his heart saying, "Get up, Aarav. Try again." The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual. He didn't jump out of bed with excitement, but he didn't hit snooze either. He just sat at his desk, took the pen in his hand, and wrote one single sentence in his notebook. "I will start again, one step at a time." His handwriting looked shaky, just like his confidence. But it was a beginning. Aarav worked at a small IT company. He used to be full of ideas, the one everyone looked to in meetings. But lately, he'd gone silent. His boss, Mr. Mehta, had noticed. That day, during the lunch break, Mr. Mehta called him into his office. "Aarav, you used to be our best performer. What happened to you, son?" Aarav hesitated. How could he explain the emptiness he'd been feeling for months? He simply said, "I don't know, sir. I lost the motivation." Mr. Mehta smiled gently. "Then don't wait for motivation. Build discipline. Motivation is a feeling. It comes and goes. Discipline stays." Those words hit Aarav hard. He nodded slowly. Maybe that was the truth he desperately needed to hear. He had spent so long waiting for motivation to just magically return, but maybe it wasn't supposed to. Maybe he had to move even when he didn't feel like it. That night he came home and made a small plan. Not a big, overwhelming one, just small daily goals. Wake up at 6 a.m., exercise for 15 minutes, read 1 page of a book, work on his side project for just 1 hour. He didn't expect miracles. He just promised himself to do it, especially when he didn't feel like it. Days turned into weeks. Some mornings he still wanted to stay buried under the covers. Some nights he still felt tired and hopeless. But he kept going. He just kept showing up. And slowly, something started to change. His energy came back, not like a sudden storm, but like a sunrise. Quiet, slow, but steady. At work, he started sharing ideas again. He spoke up in meetings. He stayed late to help his colleagues. People noticed the change. One evening, as he was leaving the office, a coworker said, "You look different these days, Aarav." "Happier." Aarav smiled softly and replied, "Maybe because I stopped waiting for motivation." That night he opened his notebook again. He looked at the blue pen, the very same one from the street boy. He wrote a new line right under his old sentence. "When you move forward, motivation follows." He didn't know that life was about to test him again. A big challenge was waiting just around the corner, one that would shake his newfound strength to its core. But for now he felt alive again. The boy with the pen had unknowingly lit a small flame that was about to grow into a roaring fire. Weeks passed, and Aarav's life was slowly getting back on track. He wasn't perfect, but he was better. Every morning, he followed his new routine: a few minutes of exercise, some reading, and 1 quiet cup of tea while watching the sunrise. He was proud of himself. After months of feeling empty, he was finally doing something again. His small side project, a simple app idea he'd dreamed about for years, was growing little by little. For the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of hope. But life has a strange way of testing you, right when you start to rise again. One evening, Aarav received an email. He opened it, his heart pounding with anticipation, hoping for good news about his app. But the words on the screen made his world stop. "We are sorry to inform you that your proposal has been rejected." It was the 3rd rejection in 2 months. He stared at the screen, frozen. That old familiar feeling of failure started to crawl back into his mind. Slow, heavy, and poisonous. He whispered to himself, "Not again. I was doing so well." That night, Aarav couldn't eat. He lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, just like he used to when his motivation had first disappeared. The darkness in the room started to feel familiar, almost comfortable. All the old thoughts returned. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'll never make it. The next morning he skipped his routine. No exercise, no reading, no work on his app. He just sat quietly, staring at the notebook where he had written, "When you move forward, motivation follows." He wanted to believe that line so badly, but right now, it felt like just empty words on a page. Later that day, Aarav met up with his childhood friend, Ria. She took one look at his tired face and asked, "Hey, what's wrong?" Aarav told her everything. The rejection, the frustration, the feeling that life was pulling him down again just as he was getting up. Ria listened silently, then said something that surprised him. "Do you know why life hits you again after you rise? Because it wants to see if you really mean it this time." Aarav looked at her, confused. She continued, "Anyone can work hard when things are easy, but real strength, real character, shows when you keep moving, even after falling again. Her words were simple, but they struck a chord deep inside him. That night, he picked up the blue pen again. He looked at it for a long time, remembering the street boy's smile, his boss's advice, and Ria's words. He opened his notebook and wrote a new line. Every time I fall, I have two choices: stay down or rise stronger. Then he turned on his laptop and opened his project. He started fixing the code, rewriting his proposal, and searching for new opportunities. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he also knew that quitting would hurt so much more. The next few days were tough. He worked long hours, faced more rejections, and got little sleep. But this time, something was different. He didn't break. He had learned a powerful lesson. Motivation can disappear in a moment, but purpose stays. One night, after hours of relentless work, an email notification popped up. Aarav clicked it open, and a smile spread across his face. Congratulations, your project has been shortlisted for final review. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes, whispering, I'm still in the game. But what Aarav didn't know was that this small success was just the beginning. It was about to lead him to his biggest challenge yet. A challenge that would test not just his hard work, but his heart. Aarav's hard work was finally paying off. His app idea had been shortlisted and investors were actually showing interest. He felt like his life was finally moving again. Slowly, but surely. Every morning he would sit by his window, holding the same blue pen he always used, just smiling at how far he had come. But life, as it often does, was waiting with another test. And this time it wasn't about work. It was personal, deeper and more painful than anything he had ever faced before. One evening, while Aarav was still at the office, his phone started ringing again and again. It was his mother. He ignored it at first, thinking, I'll just call her back after this meeting. But then a message popped up on his screen. Aarav, it's urgent. Come home right now. His heart skipped a beat. A cold wave of dread washed over him. He rushed out of the office, didn't even wait for the elevator, and hailed the first cab he could find, urging the driver to go as fast as possible. When he arrived, he saw a small crowd of neighbors gathered outside his house, whispering quietly among themselves. His chest felt tight, like a band was squeezing it. He ran inside, and suddenly, everything went silent. The world seemed to stop. His father was lying on the sofa. His eyes were closed. He wasn't breathing. Aarav froze. He could see his mother crying. Relatives were gathered around, but all he could hear was the frantic pounding of his own heart, loud, painful, breaking. He knelt beside his father, his legs giving out from under him. He took his father's hand, which was already growing cold, and whispered, Dad, wake up. Please wake up. But it was too late. A heart attack had taken him, suddenly without any warning. The days that followed blurred into an endless night. The same young man who had just rediscovered his drive, who had learned to fight for his dreams again, now sat quietly, just staring at the same four walls of his room. The blue pen, once his symbol of hope, lay untouched on the table. His notebook stayed closed. The energy, the passion, the small victories he had celebrated, it all felt like a distant memory, wiped away in a single cruel moment. He couldn't focus. He stopped going to work. He barely ate. Every little sound, every shadow in the corner of his eye, reminded him of his father's voice, his laugh. Well-meaning people would tell him to be strong, but those words felt empty, hollow. Strength couldn't bring his father back. Nothing could. One evening, his mother came quietly into his room. She didn't say much, just placed a small envelope on his desk. Your father wanted to give you this on your next birthday, she said softly, and then she left him alone. With trembling hands, Aarav opened the envelope. Inside was a small, handwritten note. It read, Dear Aarav, I know life is not always kind, but never forget, your strength doesn't come from success, it comes from what you survive. Keep going, son. I believe in you. Tears streamed down his face as he clutched the note to his heart. For the first time in weeks, he felt his father's presence, not as a painful memory, but as a guiding spirit. That night, Aarav sat down at his desk again. He picked up the blue pen, the one that had started it all, and wrote in his notebook, "I can bring him back, but I can make him proud." He looked up at the stars through his window and whispered, "I'll keep going, Dad. For you." The next morning he returned to work. His colleagues were surprised to see him back so soon, but Aarav didn't need sympathy anymore. He needed purpose. He threw himself into his project, this time with a renewed fire. He was no longer doing it just for himself, but to honor his father's belief in him. Days later, the final results of the app competition were about to be announced. The room was buzzing with excitement, but Aarav was strangely calm. He had already learned the most important lesson of his life. Success means nothing if you lose yourself along the way, and failure means nothing if you just keep trying. As he stood on the stage, waiting for the results, he smiled quietly to himself. Whatever the outcome, he knew one thing for sure: he was no longer afraid to fall. Have you ever poured your heart and soul into something, only to see someone else take home the prize? It's a feeling we all know too well. Today, I want to share a story about a young innovator named Aarav, and how a moment of failure turned into his greatest victory. The hall was buzzing with anticipation. The host announced, "Next we have Aarav Sharma, with his project One Step." As Aarav walked onto the stage, the applause was polite, but nothing extraordinary. He took a deep breath. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice a little shaky. "My name is Aarav, and I created One Step for people who, like me, sometimes lose their motivation." As he spoke, something shifted. His voice grew stronger, filled with a raw honesty that captivated the room. He explained, "This app doesn't promise instant success. It reminds people to keep moving, one small step at a time, because sometimes one step is all you need to start again." There were no flashy graphics, no complicated jargon, just simple, powerful words from the heart. The audience listened, completely absorbed. When he finished, a moment of profound silence hung in the air, before the entire hall erupted into a standing ovation. Aarav smiled, a sense of peace washing over him. He had given it his all. Hours later, the moment of truth arrived. Aarav sat in the second row, his heart pounding like a drum. The host drew out the suspense, "And the winner of this year's Innovation Challenge is..." The room fell silent. Aarav held his breath, closing his eyes. Team Technova. The name wasn't his. For a split second, the world seemed to stop. But then, Aarav opened his eyes, a gentle smile forming on his face, and he clapped for the winners. The people around him wore looks of sympathy, but Aarav didn't feel disappointment. He felt peaceful. For the first time, losing didn't sting. He hadn't won the trophy, but in that moment, he knew he hadn't lost himself. After the ceremony, an older judge, a well-known businessman named Mr. Khanna, approached him. "Aarav," he said warmly, "you didn't win the trophy, but you won hearts today. I saw the truth in your words. Let's meet next week. I have a proposal for you." Aarav was stunned but managed a grateful, "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." That night, Aarav went home and looked at the small mementos on his desk. He whispered, "I didn't win, Dad, but I didn't give up either." He opened his notebook and wrote a line that would change his perspective forever. Sometimes not winning is also a win, because it shows you how strong you've become. The following week, Aarav sat in Mr. Khanna's office. The businessman got straight to the point. "I see potential in you and in One Step. Your app might not have won the contest, but I want to invest in it. I want to help you take it further. Let's work together." Aarav couldn't believe his ears. This was it. A door was opening. Not because he had won, but because he had been authentic and persistent. With a wide, genuine smile, he replied, "Yes, sir, let's do it." Walking out of that building, a cool breeze on his face, Aarav felt a profound shift. For so long, he had been chasing motivation. desperately trying to find it. Now, he was leading it. Aarav's story reminds us that success isn't always about the trophy. It's about the journey, the growth, and staying true to yourself. True victory is found not in never falling, but in rising every time, stronger than before. Months had flown by since Mr. Khanna's life-changing offer. Aarav was now in the big leagues, working at a top startup incubator. His app, One Step, was no longer just a concept. It was a breathing, growing entity. Meetings, investor pitches, looming deadlines, and a team that looked to him for every answer. This was his new reality. To anyone looking in, Aarav was the picture of success. He had made it. But inside, it was a completely different story. The weight of it all was crushing. With every milestone his project achieved, the pressure mounted. He was constantly making snap decisions, managing expectations, deflecting criticism, and battling a relentless storm of self-doubt. It felt like juggling knives while walking a tightrope. One evening, after a particularly draining meeting, a teammate voiced their frustration. "Aarav, we can't keep tweaking the design. We need a final decision." Aarav let out a long sigh, his voice barely a whisper. "I know, I just want it to be perfect." But he knew the truth. It wasn't about perfection. It was about fear, the paralyzing fear of failing all over again, of letting down the memory of his father. Back home, his mother saw the exhaustion etched on his face. "Are you okay, Beta?" she asked gently. "You seem so worried lately." Aarav forced a weak smile. "I'm fine, Ma. Just busy with work." But alone in his room, the facade crumbled. He sat in the heavy silence, his gaze falling on the familiar notebook and blue pen on his desk. He opened it to the line he'd written months ago. "When you move forward, motivation follows." A faint smile touched his lips. He was moving forward, all right, but he was sprinting, forgetting to even breathe. The next morning was the public launch of One Step. Technically, it worked, but it was riddled with bugs. The negative comments from early users started pouring in. "This app is useless. It doesn't even open properly." Each word felt like a physical blow. Months of sleepless nights and relentless work all dismissed as useless. His team's hopeful faces turned to him, waiting for guidance, for a plan. But Aarav just sat there frozen, staring at the screen as his hands began to tremble. He mumbled an excuse and stumbled outside, making his way to the rooftop. The city lights below blurred through his tear-filled eyes. He gasped for air, whispering to the night sky. Why does success feel so much heavier than failure? Sleep was impossible that night. He found himself scrolling through old photos on his phone, searching for something, anything. And then he saw it. A picture of the young boy selling pens on the street. That infectious smile, that unshakable spirit. A realization hit him with the force of a lightning bolt. That boy had no audience, no investors, no team waiting for his approval. Yet he smiled. He wasn't working for praise or recognition, he was working for his dream. Aarav sat bolt upright. He grabbed his notebook and the blue pen, his hand moving with a newfound clarity. He wrote, "I started One Step to help people find hope, not to impress others. I forgot that. Not anymore." The next morning, he called a team meeting. His voice was steady, filled with a conviction that had been missing for weeks. "We're not chasing perfection anymore," he announced. "We're chasing our purpose. Let's fix this, step by step, just like the name of our app." A wave of relief washed over the room. His team smiled, nodded, and got back to work, their energy completely renewed. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Aarav felt light. He finally understood. Success isn't about avoiding failure, it's about holding on to the reason you started in the first place. By the end of the month, One Step crossed its first major milestone, 100,000 downloads. But more importantly, messages began to flood in. People shared stories of how the app was helping them rebuild their lives. One message stopped him in his tracks. "Your app gave me hope when I had none." Tears welled up in Aarav's eyes. This was the dream. This was what it was all for. Aarav has finally found his balance, aligning his success with his purpose. But his journey is far from over. One final life-changing moment awaits, an event that will come to define his legacy forever. A full year had passed since One Step was launched. Aarav stood by the window of his new office, a space he had once only dreamed of. The walls were lined with thank you notes from users, people whose lives had been transformed by his app. Every message held a story: a student who conquered depression to pass their exams, a single mother who found the courage to restart her small business, a man who overcame the despair of losing his job. They all shared one thing in common. They found the strength to take that first crucial step forward. But amidst all the success, Aarav never forgot where it all began, with a simple blue pen and the hopeful smile of a boy on the street. He kept that very pen on his desk right next to his father's note. To him, that pen was no longer just plastic. It was his purpose. One morning, an email landed in his inbox. It was from a school in his hometown. They were organizing a youth seminar and wanted him to be a guest speaker. Aarav hesitated. He wasn't a public speaker. The thought of standing in front of a crowd filled him with doubt, but then he remembered his own journey, a path paved with fear, self-doubt, and failure. With a quiet smile, he accepted the invitation. A week later, he stood on a small stage, looking out at hundreds of students. Their faces were filled with dreams, radiating the same kind of hope he had once lost. He took a breath and began to speak, not from a script, but from his heart. "When I was your age," he started slowly, "I thought motivation was everything. But one day I realized something important. Motivation doesn't last forever. It disappears when life gets tough. And that's when you have to learn to walk with discipline, not with fleeting feelings." The hall was silent. Every student was listening, captivated. He continued, "You don't have to climb the entire mountain in a single day. Just focus on taking one small step, then another. Because taking one step, every single day, will carry you much further than sprinting for a week, and then giving up." As he spoke, his eyes caught a small boy in the front row, holding a box of pens. The sight made his voice tremble for a moment, a wave of memory washing over him. After the event, Aarav made his way to the boy. "You sell these pens?" he asked gently. The boy nodded shyly. "Yes, sir. I want to study, but I need to help my mother first." Aarav's smile was warm and genuine. He bought a pen and said, "Keep studying, little champ. One day you'll be standing on this stage too." He walked away, holding the new pen, feeling the weight of a perfect, beautiful circle. That evening, back in his quiet office, Aarav opened his old notebook one last time. He flipped through the pages, from his first determined line, "I will start again, one step at a time," to his most recent reflection, "Success means nothing if you forget your purpose." He picked up his pen and wrote a final entry. "Motivation comes and goes, but the courage to keep going, that's forever." He closed the notebook. He no longer needed to chase motivation. He had become it. In the months that followed, One Step grew into a global program, offering workshops, mentorships, and free training for struggling youth. Aarav used every opportunity to share his message. Greatness isn't about never falling down. It's about having the strength to get up again and again. And sometimes late at night when the city was quiet and the stars were bright, he would look out his window and whisper, "I did it, Dad. I kept walking." The stars didn't answer, but deep in his heart, he knew his father was smiling. Thank you so much for watching and being a part of this journey. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that inspires. See you in the next video.